what is science and how science emerged. So we come to know that science came out as a successor to natural philosophy. So natural philosophy was the branch of Western philosophy where people studied the nature and natural phenomenon. So that was the precursor to science. So science emerged as a systematic logical framework to study, explain the happenings in nature. As we know today, science it governs all aspects of our life, whether it is our education system, it's our social life, public life, anything you take, everywhere science and technology triumphs. The reason science emerged as such a powerful tool because its ability to control the nature, to predict things, to logically explain things in an objective way. So that objectivity is considered the primary feature of science where one can predict things, one can describe the event without any subjective aspects added to it. So that's how science has emerged such a successful tool for humanity. At the root of, at the origin of science, it's actually a revolt against the way it appeared. It appeared as a revolt against church. If you look at Western origin, how it evolved, so it evolved as a revolt against church, religion. So naturally, science is, by construction, it is agnostic about the tools it presents. It's agnostic about religious aspects or spirituality or any realm which is having some aspects of subjectivity. That was never a story in this part of the land, in Indian philosophy, Indian science. So in the West, science and religion or science and spirituality, oftentimes it is described in three different theses. So first is the conflict thesis. Conflict thesis means science is necessarily against religion. Science is at conflict with, at war with religion or spirituality. Second one is independence. Let science occupy its independent domain and let religion talk about its own independent world. But the third one is cooperation, that science nourishes religion or spirituality and spirituality nourishes science. So that was the context for Western way of understanding science and spirituality or science and religion. But in the context of Indian tradition, so science and spirituality were never seen as two different things because they come out of the same framework, same system. So they are not really two independent stuffs, or they are never at conflict, because the same ontological frameworks that give rise to religion or spirituality, so that very same ontological framework also gave rise to Indian version of science. So you may say that science is science, why to make it Indian or Western? So the reason I'm deliberately making a distinction is because the way they operate. So if you define science as a systematic logical inquiry, then no issues. But when you restrict the domain of science to only physical stuff of this material realm, which can be measured in a third person way, objectively, without requirement of any first person experience or subjectivity, what we know. So if you say that, then we are limiting the scope of science. So that is how it has been. Of course, there are now many voices where in the Western context, people are trying to understand consciousness, the subjective awareness, the role of observer in different studies, so different disciplines of science. But in the Indian context, it was totally different in the sense we always had experience-centric science or experience-centric formulation of philosophy. So what it is, so it means essentially that it actually says that the world that we perceive around us, so and the perceiver, so and the perceived object, they're not really independent. So I cannot study the world independent of the observer or of the perceiver. So in our philosophical understanding, so we have created several strata of conscious experience. So it starts with sensory level, then at the level of mind, and then at the level of intellect, then at the level of identity, my false identity, which we call ego or ahankara. At that level, so and finally at the level of Atman, the pure consciousness. So the experience is something so fundamental to Indian version of science. That's why I purposefully make it say that it is different from the Western approach to understand the nature. So that's the context we are talking at. So currently, if you look at the Western philosophy or the Western science that emerged out of it, so because of this incomplete understanding of the reality and how perception shapes the reality and how perceiver, the observer, what's its role. So because of lack of, I would say, proper understanding of that, or to the extent Indian philosophical systems, 6 Indian philosophical systems, Nyaya, Vaisheshika system, Sankhya, Yoga system, and Mimamsa, Vedanta system. So the way they understand reality and perception, I would say the Western approach is, I would say it's incomplete.